Now, questions are fine, answers are fine. If you want to ask a question, then it's good to ask. You get an answer, possibly, but know that questions are only for the body-mind. Answers are only for the body-mind, and that is not what you are. Ultimately, not relatively speaking, but ultimately, questions and answers are useless. Because you are that. You are that which has no mind. You are that which cannot ask any questions, does not need to ask a question, and does not need an answer, and so cannot ask questions, cannot receive an answer. You are that which is beyond questions, answers, body, mind, thoughts, world, answers, questions, answers, thoughts. I know, relatively speaking. Relatively speaking, questions and answers can be super helpful, or they seem very helpful. That's good. It's also a trap. Like with all teachings, they have upsides and downsides. Like the invocatory verse. It's beautiful and it's a trap. Like questions and answers, they can be wonderful and they're a trap. They can be helpful to take us towards the truth, and they can be unhelpful in that they are all for the ego, the false self.
So this is my first time seeing you live. It was actually a bit overwhelming because I've been reading the readings you recommended, and they've been very helpful, very effective, at least seemingly, if we are to take on faith what you just said. But this ties in with the question I had, because you've actually talked about this, that because many people use the argument that there's nothing to be done. And you could say that that's true because all the answers and progress and all this is for the ego. But then you have also said that I suppose that the real teaching is separated from the lower teachings by the fact that it instructs you to self-attention or self-inquiry. And that would be the one action that could be done. So what you just said, I suppose there's a bit of a contradiction, but that self-attention at least has seemed to be what has been helping during these days. That route opened up relatively quickly. My whole search began with that, like almost a decade ago. And then I've been, I suppose I took a long way around. And now I'm back to this, and it has like come back alive. So should I still pursue the self-attention still? Or
Yes, I understand the
yes.
conflict. Yeah, the what you are describing, Julius, is a problem with the teaching when it's expressed verbally.
Hmm.
And that is no single verbal expression fully captures the teaching. So it is expressed spontaneously, not with any motive, or hidden motive, or not any personal intention. But the teaching is naturally expressed at different times in different ways. and it is expressed non-verbally. It's let's While it is not strictly accurate, we can say there's a non-verbal transmission. This is relatively speaking. There's non-verbal transmission, and these things, if you repeatedly come to satsang with a teacher and you receive the verbal and the non-verbal transmission from a variety of different ways, different over time, an impression kind of gets transmitted to you. And it cannot be explained by any single verbal expression or formulation.
Mm.
But to put it simply, you see, the idea is that there is nothing you can do for liberation, but you have to stop doing.
Mm.
This stop doing is known as silence or be still. When Bhagavan says Summa Ira or Summa Iru, it's written. I believe it's pronounced Summa Ira. And that means essentially just be or be still. And this is Bhagavan saying, you cannot do anything to be the self. But when you're doing something, that's the false self. You're getting in the way. So
Mm.
the teaching is to stop doing. Now, stop doing could be seen as a form of doing, but actually it isn't a form of doing. Although initially it may seem that way. So if you're running, say you're running quickly and the idea is to stop running, well, then you have to change something, don't you? Something has to change. But what you're ultimately going towards is not running, which is, in this case, let's say standing still.
Mm.
So the true practice is not to do anything. So nothing can be done to attain liberation, but we have to do nothing, literally, as
Mm.
in stop doing, do nothing. So that is the effort. The effort ultimately is to stop doing. There's some problems with this. But maybe this is helpful um, to resolve this particular conflict or tension in the way it's expressed. What do you think?
No, it makes sense in the sense that when it actually like clicks the way it should, then the mind kind of like blanks out, or at least that's how it feels. That because then the activity stops, so there's like a lapse of consciousness, and that's like then could you say that that's like the real abiding in the self?
Well, you see, you can't really abide in the self
Mm.
because, again, see, I'm going to contradict. I talk about abiding in the self all the time.
Mm. Mm.
So I'm not trying to be difficult on purpose. I'm just trying to reveal something deeper to you, which is the self is just what you are.
Mm.
Abiding in the self means not taking yourself to be that which you are not. Now, even that can be misinterpreted. So when we take ourselves to be a person, which means a separate self, which means a body-mind entity. See, I'm defining what it is to be a person. When you take yourself to be a person, then you have effectively transformed yourself into a human being. But that is not the truth. You haven't actually transformed yourself into anything because it's not possible to transform yourself into anything. You, what you actually are is the divine. But as long as you conceive of yourself as being a body mind living in a world, you will suffer accordingly because you'll be afraid of certain things happening to the body mind, and you'll be afraid of certain things happening in the environment around you, to the people around you. And then you'll naturally want to um, um, prevent certain things happening to yourself or to others or the environment, and vice versa, the opposite. You want certain things to happen to the body mind, to other body minds, to the environment. So then you have desire and attachment. It's necessary. In all this, all necessary follows on from each other, one from the other. All starts off with the belief or sense, I'm a person, I'm a body mind, which is the root ignorance. If this is not true, which it isn't, and the teachings say it isn't, if this is not true that you're a person, then how to remove this sense of being a person? Well, it's to come back to what you actually are, in which no sense of personhood actually exists. So simple way is to ignore anything that's moved. Like I sort of, I guess I did a guided meditation, didn't I? Or I shared some teachings um, whilst we were all still relatively quiet. You see, just as a slight digression, if we receive these teachings with a busy mind, it can be quite confusing.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
And there'll be times where your mind, not just your, but anyone's mind is busy, busy, busy. And this is when we get confused. We don't know what to do. But you just be still. And the truth is there. It's what you are. It reveals itself. And the teachings are so much more powerful when they're received in silence, in the atmosphere of quiet mind.
Mm.
Let me just let someone else into the meeting. Okay.
I've been watching your videos almost like practically all the time during these few weeks. And I suppose there's the same problem that because many of them, uh, you talk to different persons who have different kind of situations and questions.
Yeah.
A lot of times I've noticed that uh, I suppose some kind of a spontaneity or effortlessness comes very quickly, that I just need a kind of like a reminder from the video, and then things seem to go along on their own.
Yeah.
But it feels like that I tend to overdo it, because then I run into a video where your angle is maybe a little different, and
Mm.
then it gives me another like point to chew on, and then I kind of like I become
Yes.
outward because I start to feel, well, should I think about this now? Whereas the
Yes.
fact is that the uh,
Yes. This is the problem with trying to do this spiritual journey from books, from videos, from writings, is that you know, when a teacher talks to you directly, the context is clear.
mm,
But when you're reading in books, you're reading a static teaching from the past,
mm,
whose context may not be appropriate for you at that, you know, at a particular point in time.
mm,
That's that's why it can be quite confusing, and it, it's not necessarily satisfying at all. Um, Although it can be, relatively speaking, but you know, you don't get that necessarily the what you're really looking for.
mm,
I sometimes explain, you may have heard some of my tennis metaphors, I don't know. But if you're teaching someone to play tennis, say you're teaching a group of people to play tennis, and you're teaching the forehand, you might tell one player, if you're the coach, to hit more to the left, and you might tell someone else to hit more to the right,
mm,
you see? And then if these videos or these conversations are recorded somehow, and you're reading it as a seeker, at one point the teacher's saying, look, hit more to the left. So you're like, okay, I'll go more to the left. And then you read another book or watch another video and they're saying, hit more to the right. You're like, now what do I do? You see? In the context, the teaching was appropriate. But when you're studying retrospectively things that were recorded in the past, then it's difficult to get the clarity. And then you can get intellectuals who then build their entire school of teaching on, oh no, it's definitely you hit more to the left. You always hit more to the left. And another intellectual camp was that you hit more to the right. And then you get these two factions. This kind of thing can happen. And this
mm,
does happen. I know it's funny, right?
mm,
But this is what happens. And of course, each faction, each camp is trying their best to do the right thing, but they're coming from the wrong, they're starting with the wrong premise that these teachings, the way they're given is spontaneous.
mm,
There's no one here giving the teaching. It's just a reflection. It's like an echo. You ask a question and an echo comes back. And it depends on, if you shout really loud, you might get a loud answer back. If you ask a terrible question, you might get a terrible answer, you know. And you see this with Bhagavan's writings, the text "Who am I?" which is one of the best um, best texts ever written, in my opinion, that I've come across
mm,
about these spiritual teachings for liberation, self-realization. You see, Bhagavan, we have to praise Bhagavan for these excellent teachings, but the questioner must have been a very high-level seeker to elicit this kind of response from him.
mm,
And in other texts from the collected works, for example, we see much lower level teachings given. And this is not to criticize anyone, but it's just to say it factually. The questioners and those who elicited those answers must have been at a lower level,
mm.
And again, it's just the way it is. But have I helped you with your primary conflict of what to do or not?
Well, the primary conflict was probably that the self-attention has seemed to be something that actually um, yeah, do I need self-attention?
Yes. Okay. So if you are if you are running
Mm,
and the idea is to stop running, yeah,
mm,
do you need to slow down? Yes or no?
yes,
Yes. If you are standing still, do you need to slow down?
no,
No. Right. If you are identified with body mind, do you need to do self-attention? That's the equivalent of slowing down.
yes, yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Yes.
So you need to, when you're attached to body mind, slow down. And the
Mm,
only way to ultimately slow down, see, the attention is always going somewhere.
mm,
It'll be going to a thought or an object or the I am. So
mm,
self-attention slows us down. Eventually, when we when we slow down, it's just being what you are. And that is natural, effortless self-attention.
mm,
So self-attention is the way.
mm.
Self-attention is
Yeah.
the key. Self-attention is the primary teaching. But what is self-attention? How to do it? This is what the teaching is constantly, not constantly, this is what the teaching is explaining and trying to share. Because when what can happen in this teaching, using that running metaphor and standing still metaphor, is that we'll slow down immensely and then we'll be like sort of walking at a very slow pace. We may think we're still,
Mm,
but we're not. We're still moving very slowly. And then the discernment to realize, oh, this is still a subtle object here. You might feel like I'm abiding as a self. I'm in peace. I'm in bliss. This is usually a subtle object. And you still have to come back, slow down even more, come back to the self. This is the discernment, the Viveka. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. It just means discerning the difference between the subject and the object. And often we think we're abiding as the subject, which is the self, and we're actually abiding as a subtle object. And there's this facility, not facility, sorry, faculty in us. There's this ability in us called, which is traditionally called Viveka. Viveka means discernment, or it can mean discrimination, or it can mean wisdom. These three aspects. Um, it's this inner knowing that it's the intuitive inner knowing of the difference, intuitive knowing of the difference between that which you are and that which is a subtle object, that which you are not,
mm,
between self and non-self. It may be intellectual at first, but there's this inner faculty we have, intuitive faculty of it's inner wisdom. We know what we are, we know what we're not. And it's very easy when you're abiding as the self to either go into like a sleep-like state, which is not that, it can be very comforting and relaxing and healing,
mm,
but it's not liberating.
mm,
So that's one thing that can happen. Another thing that can happen is that we go into a essential state of bliss, which is a sensory state where we feel just very happy, but we're actually abiding in um, a mental state of happiness, which is not the self.
mm.
Again, it can be very wonderful, it can be very healing. So if if that's fine, but then that is not what we are either. And what we are is beyond these subtle feeling states, emotional states, or a sleep state, or a dream state, yeah, all these subtle states. And if we remember Bhagavan's teaching to us, who am I? To whom is this happiness occurring? To whom is this sleep-like state occurring? To whom is this blissful state occurring? And then we come out of that because we can become addicted or caught up in or attached to these states.
Yeah, yeah. And I actually find them. Uh, I actually find them very like disturbing because it feels like that the real self-attention is a very subtle thing. It's not at all like even the presence here in this session was actually a bit too overwhelming to me. It really like threw me off. I felt like there was like a like a load and a tension in the body even. And before the session, I felt like that there was like at least some kind of a centeredness. But yeah, but I've noticed the same thing happen during these weeks because uh, it feels like very often the self attention, you might get it right, but very quickly it turns into something akin to what you said. It turns into a subtle object or some kind of a subtle model of experiencing. And then you start thinking that, yes, I am abiding as the subject. But it's like, I think you've even said it somewhere that the reason why the highest level of teaching is given and given like this, and the only reason why it works is that as long as there are objects, the mind will invariably like create impressions of them, and that's why it will not really take you out.
That's
At
right.
least that was the idea I got, and that
Yeah.
has been very helpful because that's not at all the paradigm I've been like stuck with for quite many years now. But I think it felt like I found you at just the right time. It was like it was just when I needed it.
Wonderful.
Yes,
Wonderful.
but I think I still have to. I will definitely attend these sessions and also read more of the readings provided.
Well, it's wonderful that you've come here today.
Yes, definitely.
It's lovely to meet you.
You too.
And if you have any other questions, you're very welcome to ask. Thank
Yes,
you. Thank
yes.
you, Luz. Sorry, did you want to say anything else?
Uh, no, nothing important. I think I just like the questions will probably come when I get like I want to familiarize myself more with the content and the readings. And the questions will come. Yes.
Good, good. I look forward to them. Yes, as the teachings, as we get slower and slower in this metaphor of slowing down from running, Viveka becomes more important. The Viveka is the intuitive knowing of what you are versus what you are not. And just recognizing, oh, when your mind's relatively quiet, just recognizing what you are and what you're not naturally takes you towards the self. When you're running faster or when the mind's busier, you need to actively withdraw your attention. But when the mind's much quieter, you just need to recognize, and then it will naturally come back to yourself. Viveka is like a pair of tweezers. It will remove very small particles of dust or very small particles from the surface of a mirror. Whereas other practices might be like a sledgehammer. Sometimes I call bhakti the bhakti bulldozer. Because bhakti, if you've got this solid structure like a big wall of ego, bhakti comes along and smashes this wall up. It's wonderful. But bhakti may not always be the best tool to remove fine particles from the surface of a mirror. And Viveka might not be the best tool to, a pair of tweezers may not be the best tool to, demolish this big solid wall or concrete structure. So as our mind becomes more subtle, the teachings that we resonate with will change. And this might not be this is progressive over time, but it also within a day or within a week, you might wake up in the morning and need bhakti, and then by the evening you might want to do viveka, which is the path of knowledge. So yes, it could be like when you start off, you do bhakti, and then a few years later or whatever, or a few months later, you're doing viveka, path of knowledge. It could be that over time, but it could be just like within a day or within a week, or within a meditation session. When you start off, we start off with chanting here, and then within the same session, the tools change. I hope that's clear what I'm saying. If it's not, please do ask. And
Yes.
you don't have to understand all this stuff.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, my expression wasn't maybe the most clear at this time. It's always the first time. It like I will get it there. This is fine for now.
Thank you. Thank you. And I was speaking not just to you, Julius, I was speaking to everyone.
Yeah. Sure.
So what I share with you is also useful for others. I think a few people in the comments have written how it was, well, at least one person I've seen. I think, yes. Thank you. Piers.
And it was precisely that when I found your teaching, the thing that changed everything was like the attention flowing towards the subject. That was the thing that changed everything. And what you said about like stopping action, I think it threw me off because it feels like activity stops on its own if the attention flows towards the subject. But if I try to say to myself that I don't have to do anything, then I try to not do anything. Like, can you say it like this? Like, does this
Yeah.
make sense? Yeah. But now the question itself, I actually wrote it down so that I don't forget. But like if the self-attention flows correctly, can the object still be present, but your attention is just not on them? But can the
Yes.
activities go on,
That's
but your
it.
attention is elsewhere?
That's it.
Okay, so it's not like a literal disappearance, it's just like the disappearance of your attention from them.
That's it.
Okay, okay, then it makes sense. Now it makes sense. Yes. Sorry, I'm super thought heavy.
No, it's good.
Yeah, I had to like
No, it's fine. It's
to get
fine. I
yeah.
appreciate you sharing your thought process and your questions. That's great.
Mm. But yeah, then it makes sense.
Many people, when they first come to this meeting, they'll be similar to you in that way, Julius.
Mm,
And then it's very common. And then over time, you start to understand the teaching more in your head. Then you start to understand it more in your heart. And then it kind of energy kind of
mm,
shifts down from the head into the heart. And then you'll see the new people come along and do the same thing.
mm,
So it's very natural. It's very good.
mm,
When the idea isn't to remove the objects or for the objects to disappear, the idea is just to come back to yourself because you love yourself. In the first introductory paragraph to the text, Who Am I? Bhagavan Ramana says, we want to be happy. Our nature is happiness. We love ourselves the most, and therefore self-inquiry is the way to liberation, meaning we attend to that which we love, which is ourself, and we attend to that which makes us happy, which is ourself, because our nature is happiness. And then the objects can carry on going. And that's fine. Let them come and go. We don't have to stop them or do anything with them. I used to sometimes give the analogy of like, imagine you're next to a road and all these cars are going on the road. They're like all the activities. And then on the other side, we've maybe got a candle or a fireplace. And the idea is to take your attention off the cars on the road and just go towards the fireplace. Here, the fireplace represents the self. Of course, the fireplace literally is an object. The self is actually just what we are. And we can still let the cars go down the road. We're not trying to stand on the road and stop the cars. Hey! And then you get run over, or you cause an accident, or you become very unpopular. You're not trying to stop the cars going down the road. You just take your attention off and go to the fireplace. And the cars can still. But what happens over time? Initially, it's fine. The objects continue, but eventually you'll see that's called savikalpa. Savikalpa means with objects present. We're attending to ourselves. The objects are present. The objects are still there, but we're not listening to them. We're tuning them out. Eventually, it becomes nirvikalpa, which is when they actually disappear. Okay. Now, my recommendation is don't care whether it's savikalpa or nirvikalpa. It doesn't matter. It'll go. Sometimes it'll be savikalpa. Sometimes it'll be nirvikalpa. For liberation, it has to go nirvikalpa. But don't care about that. Just be in love with yourself. Be in love with Bhagavan. Bhagavan is yourself. He's there. You can even imagine him inside your your heart cavity, your heart space, inside in your chest, and just feel your love for him. Of course, even that is outward, but that may be initially helpful. So self-attention is where we can let the objects continue. Eventually, they will disappear too. But whether they appear or not, what do we care? We're just in love with ourselves. That's our intent. We're not there trying to make them disappear or anything like that.
Yeah, that's actually very helpful. That clarified it. Like then I
Fantastic.
know. Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. Yes. Good.
And it's like just one small remark. This is not a question, but
No, you say what you do what
yeah,
you
I was really blown away by the purity of Raman Maharshi's teachings. It's like, I mean, I suppose I had the same thing with as you did that. I mean, I've known the teachings for years, but I've just never understood their depths because I haven't been ripe for them. And it feels like now, after like years, like through you, it's like you just realize that, well, this has been like available right under your nose all this time, but you just like, you weren't just ready for it yet.
Timing is key.
Yeah.
It's all about timing. That's it. Thank you, Julius. Thank you. I think many people here are appreciating what you're sharing and our interaction. I can see many people are really appreciating this, so thank you.
No,
These
I hope.
questions, these questions that anyone asks, it doesn't just help you, you also will inevitably help others around you too.
Yeah, yeah. And everything I've benefited from you, obviously, those are great interactions in YouTube. It's a really good channel.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, let us take this opportunity to thank the volunteers who, you know, put all these videos together. Many of you are here today, but just let's take this opportunity to thank the people who are putting the videos together, creating them. See, the people who create the videos, they do it mainly for themselves, I hope, you see. And that's such a wonderful thing, I think. They do it for themselves and it benefits others. This is wonderful. Benefit themselves, benefit others.